And Pete Prisco is here. We're going to dive into his second mock draft. Ryan Wilson says that's old hat. I hit my second mock draft close to a year ago. Before we get into that, guys, I do want to just hit on what Joe Musa was talking about in that package, and that we don't have a clear-cut number one. Pete, how many guys do you think have a realistic shot to go number one?
Oh, I think there's 3 of them, or maybe 4. If you want to count, the pass rusher from Georgia, Walker, I think he's a possibility. But I think it's the 2 tackles, like he mentioned, and then Aidan Hutchinson. And I think it's going to come down to a decision which tackle you like against Aidan Hutchinson. Ultimately, I think that's what the pick's going to come down to.
Well, Pete, you've got the Jaguars in this mock draft taking Evan Neal out of Alabama. You had them taking Aidan Hutchinson last time. Why'd you make the switch?
Well, just in listening and talking to some people up there, it's a strong possibility that they could take Evan Neal, and here's why. Cam Robinson has the franchise tag on him. If they don't work out a deal with Cam Robinson before the draft, then I think it puts him in a position where they would have to draft an offensive tackle and then take the franchise tag off Cam Robinson. Now, I do hear that they like Cam Robinson a great deal, but you also have to be practical with the money. And so I think from that standpoint, that's why I did it. If they don't get a deal worked out with Cam Robinson, I think they will take the offensive tackle.
Yeah, that was my question, Pete. What's the deal with Cam Robinson if you're taking Evan Neal here? You and I have talked about this before. I like Ike Kwanu a little better than Evan Neal, but I understand the pick there, and I understand the need if Cam Robinson doesn't get that long-term deal. But if he does, I think they perhaps think about another direction in which to go. They got Brandon Scherf in free agency. They have Jawan Taylor, the former second-round pick, on the right side there. So I don't know if you would draft another offensive lineman if Cam Robinson signs that long-term deal. That said, maybe you do. I mean, Trevor Lawrence took an absolute beating last year. Maybe you just keep drafting offensive linemen until you figure this thing out. Otherwise, I think you go with the edge rusher, Aidan Hutchinson there. I've been doing that for months now, it feels like, since free agency. And even though 2 of the last 3 years they've taken an edge rusher in the first round, I think you do it again with Aidan Hutchinson if you feel comfortable with Cam Robinson and his future in Jacksonville.
Yeah, one thing. They also have Walker Little, who they drafted in the second round last year, and actually played really well at the end of last year, particularly against the Colts in the final game of the season at left tackle. So even if they brought Robinson back, you could draft Neal, and then you have 4 tackles. Jawan Taylor was awful last year, and he hasn't been much better the previous 2 years before that. After a good rookie season, they could get rid of him and play one of those guys at right tackle.
Neal is 12-1 right now at Caesars Sportsbook to go number 1 overall. Aidan Hutchinson, the favorite, at -300, and he goes number 2 to the Detroit Lions. We've seen some mocks that have the Lions really stretching for a quarterback here. You think there's any chance they do that with this first-round pick?
I don't. I don't think they're going to take a quarterback. I've been dead set against it all along. Just my intel tells me that they're not going to take a quarterback. And they have so many other needs. They feel they can play with Goff. Is he the long-term answer? Probably not. But there's also a scenario where they could take Hutchinson, say if Hutchinson was here, or Walker, a pass rusher, because they need a lot of help rushing the passer, take one of those guys here in this spot and come back and get your quarterback at the back end of the first round. If one of those guys fell, maybe Matt Corral, or particularly I think Desmond Ritter, if he fell, he's a possibility at the back end of the first round. So in this scenario, I think they take Hutchinson.
Yep, no, I'm with you on that one. I would take Hutchinson first overall, but here at number 2, I would take an edge rusher and probably Travon Walker. It's what I did in my latest mock draft. But the point remains, you don't need offensive line help here. You're not going to take a quarterback this high with this draft class. If we're talking Trevor Lawrence or Joe Burrow in this class, and obviously that changes the math, but those guys aren't walking through that door, so to speak. So I get the pick here. It makes a ton of sense. Aidan Hutchinson is a local guy in that he played at Michigan and had a fantastic senior season. It all adds up. You mentioned Desmond Ritter at the bottom of the first round. You and I have talked about this for a while, Pete, and I'm sure we'll talk about it over the course of this hour. I don't get the first-round buzz on Desmond Ritter, but a year ago you didn't get the first-round buzz on my guy, McCorkle Jones. So we'll see how this unfolds.
Save that thought for a little bit later, because we will be talking about Desmond Ritter in Pete's first round because he has him drafted somewhere here in the first round. Let's move on to number 3, and that's the Houston Texans. It's Travon Walker. It's a guy who right now is the second betting favorite to go number 1 overall.
Yeah, and I think he's one of those guys. I always do use Russell Westbrook as a projection guy, because when Russell Westbrook, and I use basketball as the reference, remember when he was at UCLA, he didn't put up big stats. I think his highest average was 12 points a game. But you saw NFL traits in him, and that's what you see in Travon Walker. There are NFL traits there. He's explosive, he's tough, he's physical, and I think this would be a great pick for a team like the Texans rebuilding all the way around.
Yeah, when you're the Texans, anybody you draft is going to make your team better. That's how bad you were last year. Quarterback doesn't feel like it's going to happen here. It seems like the kid out of Stanford is going to be their guy who played most of the second half of the season and actually did pretty well doing that. And as Pete noted, Travon Walker, he didn't take over games at Georgia, but that's only because he played with about 10 other first-round picks. But the athleticism and the flashes that you saw certainly got your attention. It also didn't help, by the way, that Georgia's defense was so good they ended up playing about 20 snaps a game on defense. So it took a while to figure out who was great and who was just really, really good. I think Travon Walker was really, really good last year with an opportunity to end up being great in the NFL.
Okay, let's move on to the New York Jets, who have the number 4 and the number 10 picks in this draft. And it's Kayvon Thibodeaux, who was once upon a time, a favorite to go number 1 overall. I've seen some mocks where he didn't even go in the top 20. Do you think 4 here is pretty much the ceiling for Thibodeaux?
Well, yeah, I think it's the ceiling for him, but he could fall a little further. There are great concerns about him around the scouting community. And, we hear all the talk from the draftniks. Don't pay attention to that. Talk about the scouting community and what they say. There is a major disconnect with how he played at times during his career at Oregon. Does he take plays off? And you pop the tape on, and yes, he does. He takes plays off. But I will say this. When he doesn't take plays off, when he's playing at 100%, he is a dominant player. The question with him is, where's the focus? Will he be focused in the NFL? Sometimes guys go in a different way. I'm coasting through college. I'm saving myself for the NFL, which I have no problem with if that's what you're doing, although it does show up on tape. But he might be a better NFL player than he is as a college player.
Remember we were sitting next to him, the three of us, at the draft. I asked him, do you have that fire in the belly? He said, no, I got fire in the heart. That's all that matters. Are you big into the fire in the heart?
Well, he doesn't. People don't want to hear him talk about his off-the-field stuff before he even puts on a uniform. That's part of the problem. I have no problem with it, but a lot of people don't.
Okay, so fire in the belly, you think, is greater than the fire in the heart?
I think when he wants to play, again, he's got to play. He's got to play with fire in the belly all the time.
Okay.
That's the concern.
Well, he says he doesn't have it because it's all in his heart, so you're just going to have to deal with that, Pete. Giants are at 5 here, and this is a guy that Ryan mentioned earlier, Ike Ekwonu. Ryan, you have him as your number 1 offensive lineman.
Yeah, Pete has him as number 2, it appears here. And like I said, Pete and I have talked about this over the weeks and months, and I get it, 1 and 1A. But I love Ike Ekwonu and what he is going to bring going forward. In much the same way we were talking about Travon Walker and his upside, Ike Ekwonu, the athleticism and the power and the strength with which he plays gets your attention. But he told us at the Combine, he said, I still need to get better in terms of my pass sets. And he was pretty good doing those things. In New York, is he a good fit? Yes, he is. If you've watched Daniel Jones take beating after beating over the last 3 years, he would seem like a good fit there. They have a new general manager, new coach, same quarterback in Daniel Jones, who this might be his last opportunity to prove that he deserves to be a starter in New York. I think Ike Ekwonu certainly helps him get there. And it feels like if he's sitting here at this point in the draft process, I think you run up there and take him and make that offensive line immediately better because he's a day 1 starter, whether it's left side or right side.
He is a violent player. That's what when I watch him on tape, he's a violent player. He plays nasty. He gets after people. Some people in the league, I don't see it, think he's more of a guard, but I think he's a violent player. I think he can slide over and play right tackle for the Giants and be a nasty, violent player.
So that's the top 5, and most experts, you guys included, agree that probably at number 6 is where we might start to see teams go for quarterbacks, and the Carolina Panthers are at number 6. You have them taking Malik Willis, and you've said time and time again you don't think that there are any star quarterbacks that are destined for stardom in this draft class, but the Panthers reach here for one. Why?
Well, I think when you're desperate for a quarterback, you get desperate, and that's what these teams picking quarterbacks this high are going to be. If you have to label them, they're desperate teams. Until you solve it, you got to do everything in your power to fix it, and this would be an opportunity for them to try and fix it. I don't like Malik Willis as much as everybody else does. I think he's raw. I think there's a great arm there. He's, what is he doing when he plays quarterback? That's the question. When you talk to scouts and personnel people, that was a problem for him because he came to the line of scrimmage. They run this weird offense. He rips it, and he can rip it. Don't get me wrong, but he is raw. And people comparing him to Josh Allen, no. Do not do that. It's not the same. He's a different type of quarterback. At least when Josh Allen was he had accuracy issues at Wyoming, but a lot of his passes were doinking off guys' face masks. This guy misses a lot. So I wouldn't take him, but I think Carolina, if you don't have a quarterback, you take one. I would take Pickett here, but I'll put Willis in this spot.
Okay, let's move to the Giants again here at number 7. Pete had him taking Ike Ekwonu at number 5, and now Ryan, he has him going edge with Jermaine Johnson out of Florida State.
Man, this feels pretty rich for Jermaine Johnson's name to be called number 7 overall. If you go back to before the Senior Bowl, he was probably picked 25, maybe early second round, and then he crushed it at the Senior Bowl, had a really good combine as well. We talked to him at the combine, and he's a guy with a chip on his shoulder who made huge strides when he transferred from Georgia to Florida State. That said, I don't hate the pick. I mean, it feels a huge need. They needed real pass rush help last year. Azeez Ojulari led the team in sacks. He came drafted as a second-round pick last year because of a knee injury, so he's coming back. But after that, you don't have a whole lot. And Jermaine Johnson fills a huge need. Would I take him top 7? I would have to think long and hard about it. He feels more like a middle of the first-round guy, but I get why Pete takes him here, and if you come out of this with a premier edge rusher and a premier offensive tackle, that's a great start for the Giants here with those 2 first-round picks.
Okay, let's move to another team that might be taking a quarterback with the Falcons trading away Matt Ryan, going with Marcus Mariota likely as the starter this season. And it's Kenny Pickett here at number 8. He's your number 1 quarterback, right?
He's who I would take first overall, first of the quarterbacks. I would take Kenny Pickett. And I think, again, this is a team, until you fix the position, you have to try to address it. And I think Kenny Pickett's the most NFL ready. I think he can step in right away and play. He's not going to be forced to because they do have Marcus Mariota there. But I think Kenny Pickett is the most NFL ready, can step in and play right away.
I agree that he's the most NFL ready. Pete's crazy if he thinks he's not playing next year because Marcus Mariota is going to last about 2 quarters on that offense that has absolutely no one other than Kyle Pitts. They're in worse shape than the Texans. They're in worse shape than the Jaguars. You can't name a team that has less on paper offensively than what the Falcons currently find themselves. So, again, I understand the pick. I think you could go perhaps defense here. You could take a Sauce Gardner, for example, to pair opposite A.J. Terrell. That ain't going to move the needle in terms of making your football team immeasurably better right away. Kenny Pickett isn't either. That's the issue. There's no one to be there to protect him. He's not having anyone to throw the ball to. There's not much running game to speak of. But as Pete just noted with the Carolina Panthers, sometimes when you're desperate, you do desperate things. And I'm sure Arthur Smith didn't sign up for this. He's looking for a quarterback, and if he likes Kenny Pickett, I would imagine he would think long and hard about taking him right here at number 8.
They're going to be bad enough, though, that you would think that they'll be near the top of next year's draft when there are going to be better quarterbacks, right?
Are there? I mean, everybody says that every year. Oh, next year's going to be a great quarterback class.
We're going to look at them differently than this year's class.
Well, okay, you're talking about Alabama, right? You talk about him.
Of course, Bryce Young.
He's tiny. He's 5'11". I mean, is Stroud at Ohio State?
So are you trying to say that the class of 23 draft is going to be
don't know
worse
yet.
than
I
this
think
quarterback?
there's going to be some guys that emerge. I think
Okay.
there's some quarterbacks. The Kentucky quarterback is a guy who can emerge. I think Miami's quarterback, Van Dyke, can emerge. But as of right now, we talk about Bryce Young. He's 5'11".
Ryan, have you done a 23 mock yet?
I've done 3 of them.
Okay.
And Bryce Young, Pete is actually right. There are concerns about Bryce Young. His size is a big concern. He didn't mention Tanner McKee out of Stanford. That's another guy to keep an eye on. He's bigger, so I don't know if Pete's okay with that. But I think on paper, Pete, you would admit that next year's class feels better than it did right now as we sit here looking at this class.
Yes, but okay, Stroud would probably be one, but then what? Then you got a 5'10" quarterback. Then what else do you have? I mean, seriously.
You got to keep your fingers crossed on Spencer Rattler is what you got to do.
Oh, stop it. He was awful at Oklahoma.
All right, let's move on to the Seahawks at number 9. One of those picks they got for the Broncos in that Russell Wilson trade. Pete, you got him going offensive tackle here with Charles Cross.
Yeah, and I think this is a team that has to address the offensive line. Both tackles are gone. They lost one in free agency. They don't know what they're doing with Dwayne Brown. He's still floating out. So what do? You have to find an offensive lineman. And I think Charles Cross, he played in a pass and tap offense. So there's always concerns with the left tackle. People compare him to Andre Dillard because he played in the same style of offense at Washington State. So there's always concerns with those guys. But I think this guy would step in and be a heck of a starting tackle for them right away.
Cross number 9 to the Seahawks. And now we close out the top 10 with the New York Jets coming around again. Pete had him going with Kayvon Thibodeaux at number 4. This would be saucy if you get Thibodeaux at 4 and you get Sauce Gardner at 10.
Yeah, and I think this is a team that's moving in the right direction with their coach. And if you look at Robert Saleh, you got to get better at certain spots. Pass rusher, they address corner a little bit, but another corner would be great to add to that mix. I think this kid's the best corner in the draft. Long, athletic, can cover, and was outstanding in man coverage. Now, they play a different style of defense. They don't play as much man, but I think he would be perfect for adding another play. Hey, we're playing Josh Allen in that division twice a year. If you want to get to the mountaintop, you got to be able to cover people.
Yeah, I love Sauce Gardner. He's my cornerback 1 as well. I wonder if offensive tackle might be an option here, depending on what happens to Mekhi Becton. But look, if you take him top 10 and Mike Gardner, he could go top 5. I get it. It makes perfect sense.
Jets fans, though, I mean, at some point you got to say, you're going to help the quarterback out a little bit? You're going to help Zach Wilson out? I mean, it was bad last season on offense.
Well, and they could take a wide receiver. I think that's a possibility as well. I mean, they could use some wide receiver help, and maybe, a guy like Garrett Wilson would be in play here. Or maybe they're going to be risky and take a chance on Jameson Williams, which he's running again. At least close to running again. That guy's going to be playing in the middle of November or maybe late October. So if you're a team in desperate need of a wide receiver, he's the best wide receiver in this draft class when healthy.
All right, no wide receivers yet, but I'm sure those are to come in the teens here in Pete Prisco's Mock Draft 2.0. Let's recap 1 through 10 here. Evan Neal going number 1 to the Jacksonville Jaguars, with Aidan Hutchinson falling to the Lions at 2. Thibodeaux 4 to the Jets, and a couple of quarterbacks. Malik Willis 6 to the Panthers. Kenny Pickett 8 to the Atlanta Falcons. Let's move on to the Commanders at number 11. I'm Chris Hassel, joined by Pete Prisco and Ryan Wilson as well. And you got Kyle Hamilton here. This is a guy, we were talking with Charles Davis last week, Ryan and I, and he has Kyle Hamilton number 1 on his big board.
I think he's overrated.
Were you going to say something bad about
Charles
Davis?
No, I
never
like
said
Charles.
a bad word about Charles.
No, I love Charles Davis. I just think I think Kyle Hamilton's overrated. And when you watch his tape, there's a lot of concern there with his ability to turn and cover. He's a big physical guy. Plus, he ran 4.7.
Low 40. Yeah.
That's a terrible time. And the whole thing about him was, he can go sideline to sideline. If you're running 4.7, you're not going sideline to sideline. That's a concern. So I think he's a little overrated. I wouldn't have him as my top safety in this draft even. I could see where people like him because of the look of him, the big physical style. I would not put him at number 1 in any rankings that I would put out. So take that for what it's worth.
Yeah, Charles. Ryan?
Jeez, Charles can't catch a break here. Here's the thing, Pete. He'll get there eventually, sideline to sideline, just it'll take him 4.7 to get there. He plays faster than that, and you'll admit that, Pete. He didn't look like 4.74 on the field. He ran the 4.59 at the combine, so maybe he's somewhere in between there at his best. I think he's a really good football player. I don't think he's a top 5 pick. I get what you're saying there. And I was actually looking through some recent drafts. I don't think he's better than Minkah Fitzpatrick coming out. I know you and Minkah have a history going back a few years ago, but I don't know how you feel about that either. Would you take Minkah or Kyle in terms of first safety off the board?
Minkah was a corner when he
But he plays safety now.
Yeah, but he was a corner. They drafted him as a corner, so he wasn't drafted. The position value isn't there either.
Is he a top 100 player now?
Yes. If you look at the position, although he didn't play very well at the beginning of last season, I will say that. When the position value isn't there. If I ask you right now, and we've had these conversations before, name the safeties in the last 20 years that have impacted the game. Impacted the game to the point where you go, wow.
Mike Brown of the Bears?
No, Ed Reed and Troy Polamalu. Is Derwin James?
Hey, I just said Mike Brown.
Nah, he didn't impact the game like that.
He was a ball hawk.
He was okay. The bottom line is you don't draft safeties in the top 10 or 11 or 12 or 13. I wouldn't, but I gave them to the Commanders. I think they could also go wide receiver here. And by the way, I'm not mocking. Everybody has their opinion on everything.
Sure.
Charles Davis has his. Chris Trapasso has Kyle Hamilton at number 1 as well.
Does he too? Okay.
Yeah, so they're not alone.
Okay, well, again, this is Pete's mock draft. You're making these picks. This is what you think the teams are going to do here.
Correct.
This isn't
It's not what I would do,
what
but I
you
like to
think.
throw my opinion in as well because I play GM every day of the week.
You think you're better than all of them as well. The Vikings are coming up at number 12. You got that slick offense. Kirk Cousins maybe not included, but a lot of pieces there. So you're going defense here. And how about getting Patrick Peterson a little bayou buddy in Derek Stingley Jr.?
I think this would be a great pick for them. And there are people in the league who think Stingley is a better player than Sauce Gardner. When he's healthy, he's right there with him. Now, that's the concern, the health. He wasn't always 100%, had a kind of a little drop-off in his play at times because of that. But I think when he's healthy and focused, he's going to be outstanding. Getting on the Vikings roster with Patrick Peterson, who is a pro's pro, would be great for Derek Stingley, and they do need another corner. I think that would make all the sense in the world for the Minnesota Vikings to take Stingley.
That's the 12th pick in Pete Prisco's second mock draft. The Texans are coming up again here at 13. Pete had him taking defensive lineman Trevon Walker at number 3. And Ryan, he's going defense again here and defensive line again here with Jordan Davis. You had the Texans going with a wide receiver here with this pick in your latest mock. You think that would be the better direction for them?
Well, I mean, Pete Gettleman here, he's only drafting big guys to play in the middle. I think the Texans have a ton of needs. And I know they play different positions, and you can line up Trevon Walker as a 3-tech or even out to a 5 technique if you want. And Jordan Davis is just going to be a space eater who's insanely athletic for someone of that size and stature. But I do wonder, like, offensive tackle could be a consideration here if you want to give Davis Mills someone to throw the ball to. Protecting Davis Mills might be sort of important here if you want to draft an offensive tackle as well, although the top 3 guys are already gone. So you have to love a Trevor Penny, for example, to make that happen. I get it on some level, but I don't know how important it's going to be to take Trevon Walker, who could be a superstar, and then Jordan Davis, who might be a 2.5 down player, Pete.
I don't think he's going to be a 2.5 down player. I think he's an every down player. I think he's going to be a force as a rush guy as well. This guy is improving as a pass rusher. He spent the offseason working with Chuck Smith. I know Chuck very well. Chuck vouches for him all the time about his ability to rush the passer. And by the way, as my good buddy Tony Baselli always says, there's only so many people, big people on the planet who can do what these guys do. When in doubt, take a big guy.
So can you say Hall of Famer Tony Baselli right now, or do you have to wait until he gets actually enshrined?
Yeah, he's been signing autographs, Hall of Famer, so he's in already. And by the way, the value of those goes up.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure you have a few. Hey, let's move on to the Ravens at number 14. It's cornerback Trent McDuffie out of Washington. Why do you think this is a really good fit for what they do defensively?
Well, I think he's one of those guys that'll lock up and play man. I mean, he can do it. He's one of those guys that's done it at times at Washington. Now, I personally like the other corner at Washington better, Gordon. But when you look at this grouping right here, I think most of the league people think that McDuffie's a better player. So I think he fits with what they want to do. And you know what? They're a team that wants to play press man. That's what they want to do.
All right, let's move on to the Eagles, who now have just 2 picks in the top 20 now after a trade earlier on this week where they kind of swapped some picks with the Saints. Eagles going with a wide receiver, Jameson Williams here, and this is higher than we've seen him in some mocks because it seems like he's getting a little bit healthier, Ryan.
Yeah, so he had the ACL injury at the championship game, the national championship game, and that's a 6, 7, 8 month recovery process. And as Pete noted earlier, he'll be ready to go probably around Halloween. Fastest wide receiver in this draft class, almost certainly. It's hilarious that he had to transfer from Ohio State to get playing time. And if he wasn't injured, he probably would be wide receiver 1. I'm fine with this pick. I love Garrett Wilson. He's currently my healthy wide receiver 1. I love Drake London, who's number 2. But Jameson Williams has a chance to be special, and then he joins Devonte Smith. And perhaps this helps Jalen Raider get over the hump and be more like that first-round pick they hope they drafted a few years ago. And look, at the end of the day, if you're uncertain, just draft Alabama guys. And even though Jameson Williams was only there for a year, he was special in that 1 year.
That's the first wide receiver off the board there at number 15 for Pete Prisco in the final pick of the first half of the first round here. The Saints at number 16, the team that made that trade earlier on in the week to get a couple of picks in the top 20. Pete, you take a look at the trade details here, and it's kind of, how would you describe the swap? A lot of people think that the Eagles got the better end of this thing.
They fleeced them. I think this is.
So why would the Saints do it?
Look, they might be trying to get a left tackle and another position here, a wide receiver, but I don't understand the whole mechanism of the thing. They got fleeced. Unless they're going to try and move up to go get one of the top quarterbacks, which I can't see them doing. They do need a quarterback. Let's be real. I mean, they were trying to get Deshaun Watson. They were looking at other guys. And when you look up...
do you consider this, because you have him taking Desmond Ritter.
I think Desmond Ritter's better than Malik Willis.
Do you consider this, though, would you call this trading up for a quarterback? Would this fit that bill?
No, I'm talking about if they took 2 more picks, took these 2 picks and went to go get one of the other guys. And that's why I sent that tweet out saying if you trade up to go get one of those 2 guys, you're making a major mistake. But if you stay here, now that you're here, and you take Ritter, and then you can get another piece with your other pick, then I understand that. I think, and I'm in the minority on this, but you know me, I'll stick my neck out for guys, Josh Allen, Mills, Davis Mills. I was, ahead of the curve on those 2. I'm ahead of the curve on this one. I think Ritter is better than Malik Willis.
Did you hear that, Ryan? He stuck his neck out for Davis Mills last year. Those are Pete's words.
Well, I did. I was one of the few.
A long neck Davis Mills who won the 3rd round. Way to go, Pete. You took one. You really went on a limb on that
If
one.
he was in this draft, he'd be the first. Hey, Ryan, if he was in this draft, he'd be the first quarterback taken. The first, ahead of all those other guys.
Absolutely, because this quarterback class, as we've noted several times over the course of the last 8 months, is not very good. But I'll just have one question for you about Desmond Ritter, who I love. When we spoke with him at the Combine, you made fun of me for falling in love with all those guys. He is a leader among leaders, and he had a lot to do with Cincinnati's success. But, Pete, his accuracy issues are troubling if you're going to take him among the first 32 picks. So how are you reconciling that with taking him in the middle of the first round?
I don't think his accuracy issues are that bad. I'm going to give you a couple examples. I'm going to go back to the Alabama game where everybody said he played awful in that game. Terrible, right? There was a play where he read the field right, had a touchdown, had Pierce beat the corner in a man move, and it was batted down to the line of scrimmage. He had 6 passes batted down at the line of scrimmage in that game. 6. His offensive line wasn't very good. I think his accuracy is better than you think. I think he anticipates, he reads the field. And here's the other thing. Ryan mentioned it. In talking to people leading up to this draft and talking to scouts and personnel people and coaches I respect, they say Ritter commands. When he walks in, he commands it. And that's what you want from your quarterback. You don't want a mealy-mouthed quarterback. You want a guy who's going to walk in.
Who would be a mealy-mouthed quarterback?
There's been plenty of them.
Name one of them.
Well, I mean, there's some people who think Tua is mealy-mouthed. So take it for what it's worth.
I like how you don't say that you think he is. You said, well, some people think he is. That's Pete Prisco for you. Let's move to 17 now, and the Chargers. And Ryan, Pete has him going offensive lineman here, Trevor Penny out of Northern Iowa.
Yeah, this is another young man who plays with an edge. You talk about Desmond Ritter playing angry on some respects. Trevor Penny takes it to another level. This guy is borderline insane in terms of how he plays. We saw it at the Senior Bowl. He kept body slamming defensive ends to the point where the coaching staff was yelling at him to quit doing it. And he told us at the Combine his whole point was to prove that he belonged there, that they made a mistake, FBS teams, by not recruiting him as an FCS talent. And I understand why the Chargers would take him here. He can play on the right side. Storm Norton was a huge issue last year. You have Rashawn Slater, who was a great find last year at the top of the first round there. And I think that Trevor Penny makes life a lot easier for Justin Herbert.
Yeah, borderline insane. He's an Iowa kid. It's just, you grow up in a cornfield, and it makes you a little bit crazy. You go a little bit nuts. You get a little bit crazy sometimes.
Takes one to know one.
Exactly. All right, Eagles at 18 now. You had them taking Jameson Williams, the wide receiver there out of Alabama, at number 15. This time, going with the edge, George Carloftas.
Yeah, and this is a kid, when he watched his tape, he plays hard, he plays tough, he plays physical, and he worked out better than people thought he would. There was the knock on him that he's not that athletic. He was much more athletic in his workout than most scouts and personnel people thought. I think he's going to be a really good NFL player. Will he ever be a 17, 16 sack guy? No, but I think consistently he could be a 10 and 11 sack guy and play hard, play tough. And the Eagles are getting a little older on that defensive line. They need to get some young blood there.
All right, pass rush has been an issue. That might help solve the pass rush issues for Philadelphia. So they go wide receiver and edge there with their 2 picks. Saints also have 2 picks now in the top 20. You had them going Desmond Ritter at 16. At 19, you're getting Desmond Ritter and Jameis Winston. Some help here at the wide receiver position, and Garrett Wilson out of Ohio State. Ryan, you had him in your top 10 in your latest mock.
I love Garrett Wilson. Pete noted it's sort of weird. Why would you do all this trading around to get Desmond Ritter and then get a wide receiver that you probably could have gotten one if you'd stayed pat? But whatever, that's a conversation for another time. But I love the idea of Garrett Wilson coming in there. We have no idea what's going on with Mike Thomas and his future in New Orleans. They need desperately some wide receivers, and this is automatic offense for Jameis Winston or whoever's under center by the time the season ends. He is electric. He told us at the Combine that Chris Olave's team at Ohio State was faster than he was. Garrett Wilson timed just a tenth of a second faster in the 40, but he played faster consistently when you watched him over the course of last season. And he reminds me, in terms of his athleticism and playmaking ability, of Odell Beckham at his best. And I think that fits into exactly what that Saints offense gives you. And I just wonder if perhaps they had taken offensive linemen instead of Des Ritter. Does that suddenly transform an offense that has some big gaping holes, and that offensive line remains a hole if you don't draft one here?
What are you doing, trading up to draft Penning? I'm not doing that. Are you trading up to draft Trevor Penning? I wouldn't do that. That's why it's a little weird.
No, I wouldn't trade at all.
Well, you wouldn't have traded. I wouldn't have traded either. But they clearly are trading up with something in mind, whether it's to draft a tackle and a receiver and tackle, or to package those picks and go up and get a quarterback they like. They have something in mind because they gave away the farm to go up and do what they did.
Let's move on to Pittsburgh, number 20, and looking for the replacement for Big Ben Roethlisberger. Probably not going to be Mitch Trubisky. At least I know Pete doesn't think so. Matt Corral out of Ole Miss. Why do you think that this is a really good fit for what they do offensively with the passing game?
Well, because their offense, what they want to do is run a lot of RPO stuff and get and he's perfect for that. He ran a lot of that stuff at Ole Miss, and so I think he would fit with what they do. Plus, Trubisky can play for a year. The one concern about Matt Corral, one of the concerns, is he's little. He's small. He's thin. He only weighed 205. He played at 205 last year. They tried to get him up to 215. He never got to that. So a year watching Trubisky play, put on the weight, and then maybe the Steelers have their quarterback in the future. I wouldn't take him here, but I'm just saying desperate teams for the quarterbacks do desperate things.
Yeah, I don't know if it's desperate at 20, but Matt Corral's been my QB1 throughout the fall. That hasn't changed. I like him a lot. I know some teams like him as their QB1s, but again, you talk to 32 teams, you get 32 different answers. And Pete, you were right about the RPO connection between the Steelers and Ole Miss and Matt Corral, because there's really no other reason to bring Matt Canada back as the offensive coordinator based on what happened last year, unless you really plan on running that RPO offense, because we saw none of it last year. Big Ben struggled, the offense struggled. So I think if you're going to do that, and Mr. Trubisky's only on a 2-year deal, draft Matt Corral if you like him. And if you like him a lot, take him there at 20 and see what happens.
For as bad as we think this quarterback class is, Pete, you still had 4 quarterbacks in your top 20.
Because there's desperation.
Yeah.
Until you solve it, until you fix it, you got to keep
And it's quarterback
taking your
league.
shots at
That's
it.
what it's all about. So what the Bengals did with Joe Burrow in the second
You get
season.
those one guys, the guys that fill in like Trubisky's of the world and stuff. You might have your aberration seasons, everything might go your way, but to have sustainable success in this league, you have to have a legitimate quarterback. So
That's your top
swing
20
for it. Yeah.
from Pete Prisco. Let's recap 11 through 20 here and a couple more quarterbacks. We just saw Matt Corral going to the Steelers, but he also had Desmond Ritter going to the New Orleans Saints. Again, the draft order has switched a little bit here in the late teens this week with the Saints and the Eagles trading with one another. So now the Eagles no longer have 3 top 20 picks. They have 2, so do the Saints, so do the Giants, so do the Jets.
But we're going to start with the Patriots at 21. Baylor safety Jaylen Petrie. Pete, I found a tweet from you because I had not seen Mr. Petrie on a mock. You said, March 30th, by the way, here's an opinion most won't agree with. Jaylen Petrie will be better than Kyle Hamilton. He is Honey Badger 2.0.
He really is. And when you watch the tape and the way they used him, they put him at the line of scrimmage. He could play off. He could cover. He's athletic. He's tough. He can blitz. He reminds me of Honey Badger. And when you look at the Patriots and how they draft defensive players, they like guys who can do a lot of things. And this guy is versatile and can do a lot of things. So he just fits. And right, I'm sticking with that, by the way. I'm taking that all the way through the draft process. You can take it for the next 3 years, and in 3 years come back to me. Petrie will be a better player than Kyle Hamilton.
Yeah, I don't know if I'll go that far, Pete, but I love Petrie as well. And you're exactly right talking about the fit in New England. They look for guys to do everything, and he does a little bit of everything. He can play in the slot. He can play outside if you want, play in deep center field, play in the box. Again, line him up anywhere. He's sort of maybe even like a miniaturized version of Kyle Duggar, who they drafted a few years ago, and who's been really good there early on in his career. There are a number of safeties in this class who are really good. And by safety, I mean guys who play slot and everywhere else, not just deep center fielders or strong safeties. But again, I'm not quite willing to go over the Kyle Hamilton talk there, but I get where you're going with it.
Has he been in your first round at all, Ryan?
No, I've had him as a second-round pick since the fall. He had a really good Senior Bowl, had a really good combine, and he's a good young player who I think, as Pete notes, is going to get a lot better. I just haven't had him squeezed into the first round. There are guys like Lewis Seen out of Georgia, Kirby Joseph out of Illinois, Dax Hill out of Michigan. Those guys are all grouped together, all sort of late round 1, early round 2 type guys for me.
Pete Prisco, president of the Petrie fan club. Let's go to the Packers at 22. Yes. This is the trade coming from the Raiders, or the pick coming from the Raiders, because of Devonte Adams. You're going with Drake London, wide receiver, USC. Are you just convinced they're taking wide receiver here?
Well, they haven't taken one since Javon Walker way back in the day.
02.
Yeah, and that's a long time ago, but they have to. I mean, there's no reason they can take any other position. They have to take a wide receiver. They have no speed right now. Now, Drake London's not a burner, but he's a big target, and I think he goes before this. I actually think when this all plays out, when you talk to the league people, they have him ranked much higher than a lot of the draft analysts do. He's a big, strong kid. Now, he's got a pro day coming up. That'll be big because he had an injured ankle last year, but I think this would be a great pick for the Packers.
Yeah, you're right, Pete. I talked to folks in the league, and they absolutely love Drake London. I was put on to him over the summer, and I didn't love him at the time. This year, he had a fantastic season. I think he's going to end up being better than Michael Pittman, who was a second-round pick of the Colts, his former teammate out of USC. And I had a scout compare him to a bigger version of Devonte Adams, so it makes sense that he is going to Green Bay, where I think he has a chance to have immediate success, because there's literally no one else to throw the ball to unless you're thinking about Randall Cobb and Amari Rodgers and Alan Lazard. So I think you certainly take one here. That said, 2 years ago, the deepest wide receiver class in human history, The old Packers took exactly 0 wide receivers throughout the draft, so we'll see.
They had Devonte Adams back then.
Still had You're okay. Let's go to the Cardinals at 23. You're going with Minnesota edge rusher Boye Mafe, helping to kind of cushion that Chandler Jones loss.
Yeah, you have to get somebody who can rush the passer. And this is a kid through the draft process in the last couple months that's his ranking has soared. It's caused a lot of people to go back in and do the work on him. He's one of those players that's, I think, just scratching the surface. He's going to get better and better as he gets to the NFL. So for the Cardinals, who have a void there, get a young edge rusher who can come off the corner.
All right, let's go to the Cowboys at 24. This is somebody, Ryan, that I've seen a bunch in your mock drafts as well. Iowa center Tyler Linderbaum. Right now, you have them taking another offensive lineman, I believe. But what do you think about this?
I love it. I've loved Linderbaum since the fall, when he was typically dominating folks week in and week out. He showed up at the combine under 300 pounds, which is a little light. I'm sure he can gain that weight back. They have Tyler Beatish now, the former Wisconsin player, who's okay. He's not going to be a Hall of Famer, and I think Linderbaum allows you to upgrade the center of that offensive line and help not only Dak Prescott, but help the running game and Zeke Elliott and everything that goes along with it. I feel like this is a pretty easy pick for the Cowboys sitting here if other options are exhausted, if they're looking for a defensive lineman, for example, like a Jordan Davis or perhaps a wide receiver. Take Linderbaum and feel good about it.
Let's go to the Bills at 25. Pete, not a whole lot of concern when it comes to this Bills team, but you said cornerback is one of those, and you're trying to fix that here.
Yeah, and they have a young corner that they like in Jackson, but they have to get another one. And you can never have enough corners in this league. And I think Andrew Booth would be a good pick for them. This is a good athletic corner who can come up, like you can see on these highlights, and play the run. But you don't draft cornerbacks to play the run. You draft cornerbacks because they can cover. And I think he's one of those guys that would step in and push for a starting job right away. This is a deep, talented team. That's the one spot when you look at it, you go, okay, right there at corner, you have to get another one.
Let's go to the Titans at 26. You have them taking Tulsa's Tyler Smith. This is somebody also not in Ryan's first round mock. You say that NFL scouts like them more than the draft media. Are you part of the draft media?
I am, but I envision myself as a scout too. So I told Ryan to go back and watch some more tape on Tyler Smith. Tyler Smith is a nasty, violent player, plays with an edge, plays with an attitude. And he played left tackle. I think he could play right tackle, which I think the Titans would pick him, play him at right tackle, and then down the road they can move him over to the left side if they get tired of Taylor Lewan on the other side.
Let's go to the Bucs at 27. Pete has them taking Georgia defensive tackle Devonte Wyatt. Right at 27, you have the Bucs beefing up their offensive line. So what do you think about Wyatt?
He's going to be a great pick if he lands here. They have Vita Vea, of course, and they need some depth there, so it would certainly make sense. This is a team that made some moves in free agency, so they don't have quite as many needs as they had perhaps 8 weeks ago. Tom Brady coming back obviously helps that as well. I wonder if Devonte White will even be here. He's, again, part of this Georgia defense that everyone on that list that played on that championship team appears to be rising in the eyes of NFL draft media. I know NFL teams love Devonte Wyatt, and there's a lot to love. He went to the Senior Bowl and really impressed a lot of folks. And as I mentioned, talking about Travon Walker and Jordan Davis, there's so few snaps of Georgia defense game in and game out because they were so dominant. You have to watch 7 or 8 games to get an idea of a player. I think he's going to be a really good football player. He's incredibly quick for his size. He's strong. He can play 3 technique. You can kick him inside to 0 if you want to. He does a lot, and he did a lot last year for a team that, again, had so many good football players. But I think Devonte Wyatt is quietly had coming off a really good season and deserves to be that first-round pick.
A couple things about the Georgia defensive tackles going in the first round, both of them, Jordan Davis and Devonte Wyatt. Jalen Carter next year he's going to be the better. He's the better of the guys.
Oh,
he's
good.
the better one. So keep an eye on that. Number 88, watch him all year. And also, the Bucs, they have to decide what they're going to do in the Ndamukong Suh if he wants to play, and that's why I think this fits next to Vita Vea.
Which may change this a little bit. We'll
or if they don't
see what
draft
happens.
one,
exactly.
then he comes back. Yeah.
Let's go back to the Packers at 28. So at 22, you have them going with a wide receiver. Pete, yet again, another wide receiver at 28. And Ryan has the same thing in his mock.
Yeah, look, you have to take wide receivers. If the Packers came out of this draft with Drake London and Chris Olave, are they back being a favorite in the NFC again? I think you'd have to consider that. These two are going to be immediate playmakers on offense. One a big physical receiver, the other one a shorter, shiftier, faster receiver. If they could come out of this draft with these two guys, Rodgers will love those guys, and that offense will be much better.
Absolutely, Chris. I called you Chris. Absolutely, Pete.
I'm Chris
I'm
Olave.
looking at Chris Olave's name here. Chris, Pete Olave. But I think the takeaway is this as well. We always say, well, you can get a guy on day 2 and day 3 because his class is so deep. This wide receiver class isn't as deep as the one we just talked about from 2 years ago. It's a good wide receiver class for sure, but you're not getting Chris Olave type production in the 2nd or 3rd round, and I don't think it's even silly at all to consider taking 2 of these wide receivers in round 1, given that you have virtually no one running routes right now for Aaron Rodgers, who came back, and as a result of him coming back, Devonte Adams decided to go to Las Vegas.
All right, guys, hang on just a second. Just a couple more, but let's recap what we did 21 through 28. The Packers taking 2 wide receivers. They have not drafted a wide receiver, as Pete mentioned, since 2002. So 2 going at 22 and 28. And keep an eye there. 21, Jaylen Petrie. Pete calling him Honey Badger 2.0. Pete Prisco's second mock draft here, taking a look at 29 through 30. That is the order. The Chiefs now having the 29th pick because they no longer have Tyreek Hill. So what will they do at 29 through 30? Let's take a look. All right, let's go to the Chiefs at 29 here. Again, that pick part of the trade for Tyreek Hill from the Dolphins. Pete, you're going with Penn State wide receiver Jahan Dotson. He's not Tyreek Hill.
No, nobody's Tyreek Hill.
He's got speed.
He's got speed, and he's one of those guys that when you talk to the receiver coaches in this league, they love this guy, and they think he's going to be an immediate impact player. He'd be perfect for this offense. I think it makes sense to draft a wide receiver here. You could also go corner here, but they have back-to-back picks, so whatever way you want to do it, you do it. But I think you get a wide receiver with this pick in Dotson.
Yeah, I like Jahan Dotson as a second rounder, maybe mid to early. That said, as you noted there, Pete, he's going to Kansas City. It's not like he's going to a team that doesn't have a quarterback or someone like Andy Reid calling the play. So I think it's a perfect fit. I would consider Treylon Burks here, but you have Juju Smith-Schuster, and they're similar type players. So get someone who is speedy on the outside and can take the ball to the house every single time he touches it. He played with K.J. Hamler a few years ago at Penn State. I think K.J. Hamler was a slightly better player coming out. Hamler hasn't quite had it click together for him at the Broncos yet, but I think, again, go somewhere like Denver, and perhaps your career will go in the right direction sooner rather than later.
Chiefs at 30, yet again, unlike the Packers, you're not going with 2 wide receivers here. But like the Bills, you said, look, you can always use a corner, and that's what you're doing.
Yeah, they lost Charvarius Ward to the 49ers in free agency, and they have a hole there at the cornerback position. They need to address that. And Kaiir Elam is a kid. He's got all the tools. Now, they didn't always translate. He did make plays, but he could be better than what he was at Florida. Again, a guy who, when you look at him, you project. It's more of a projection, and I think when you project him, he's going to be a really good player in the NFL.
Yeah, he's long, he's physical, he's fast, he's great at the catch point. He doesn't tackle very well coming downhill, which is sort of curious given how physical he is throughout the route, but I think he's a good player, and as Pete notes, they need depth there in that secondary. They're only down to about 2 or 3 guys with some starting experience.
Bengals at 31, you were going with Washington quarterback Kyler Gordon. I heard you earlier telling Chris, and I read it in your article, you kind of like him a little bit more than Trip McDuffie, but he's going behind him.
I do, and I watched a bunch of tape of the 2 of them this week, and I think they're both really good. Don't get me wrong. I think they're both potential first-round picks. He's just a little bit better to me in terms of how it's going to translate on the next level in the NFL. I think he's physical. I think he's tough. I think he's a little bit bigger than McDuffie. I like Gordon. And when you look at the Bengals, Eli Apple's back on a 1-year deal. It's not like he's a star corner anyway, so get a young corner you can put in there and start for a long time.
All right, let's finish up with the Lions at 32. Let's go to the Lions at 32. Pete, last week you did not have them taking a quarterback. At the time you said if there was one, it would be Desmond Ritter. Desmond Ritter's already gone. You're still not going with a quarterback in this position.
No, because the only option I think here would be Sam Howell, and I don't think they're going to do that. So what you do is you come back, get a wide receiver. I think Treylon Burks is a big-time player at Arkansas. He put up big numbers in a good league. The concern with him, and I was talking to some receiver coaches this week, how's he going to hold his weight in check? Because he has a tendency to get a little big, and when you get a little big, you get a little slower, and that's a concern for him. But if he keeps his weight in check and he's focused all the time, big physical receiver, I think he ran away from SEC quarters, so he's fast enough, even though he's not a burner on the clock.
Yep, I'm with you there. He ran a 4.55 at the Combine. Do not care at all. I mentioned Juju Smith-Schuster earlier. That's a good comp. Anquan Bolden's a similar comp. Deebo Samuel's a good comp. And if you like those sorts of players on your team, then I think Treylon Burks is the guy for you. And as you noted, Pete, despite the 4.55 speed, he typically outran everyone he faced in the SEC. So there's a lot to like about his game, and I think he helps Jared Goff out immensely and comparing with Amon-Ra St. Brown coming off that great rookie season. And then you're working with something there in Detroit.
Ryan, really quickly, Pete said he didn't think that they would take Sam Howell in this position. Who do you have going to the Lions at 32 right now?
Samuel H. Howell III. I don't know if he's the third or not, but I'm taking Sam Howell there. Again, it just depends on what they want to do with Jared Goff, who actually played better than we probably all expected a year ago. I like Sam Howell better than most people. I like him a little bit better than Pete. I went back and watched 3 or 4 of his games and was impressed with that. We'll see how NFL teams feel about him. I know there's some teams that wish he'd gone back to school. Clearly he came out, and then we'll find out in 3 weeks now where he actually ends up getting drafted.
I don't dislike Sam Howell. I think he played with a bad offensive line last year and took a beating, but he started seeing ghosts at times, and that's a concern. By the way, Jalen Tolbert's another wide receiver. A lot of guys in the league talking up Jalen Tolbert, who doesn't get any first-round love, and he's a guy that might find his way back into the first round.
I realize we need an I told you so list. We need a Pete Prisco I told you so list every year.
But don't get me wrong, I have Christian Hackenberg on my don't list, by the way. I like Christian Hackenberg.
A don't list and an I told you so list, and we'll revisit it as the year goes along. Ryan Wilson, by the way, you can check out his latest mock draft as well on CBSSports.com along with Pete Prisco. You can catch out both of these guys on the Pick Six podcast. Latest episode, it's a mailbag, and they also talk about teams that should trade up and should trade down. Latest mock drafts there. Download and follow. Do you want a sports network that delivers everything that matters about the game? The highlights, the picks, the instant analysis, no yelling, no fake debates, no politics. Hit the subscribe button and never miss a moment.